we need better education. We need to put this stuff, curriculum, for people to understand that recycling is more than an aluminum can, more than a plastic bottle. Because the bulk of all, the majority, the 90 percentile of all recycling is based from industrial-based recycling and obsolete materials recycling. And that's what our industry is doing. And the more we learn and more we can share and teach people about what it is our industry does, the more understanding and the better in the future our industry can be, because more people want to be involved with it, more people want to come work in it, and innovate within it.
Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible. All right, welcome everybody. We're privileged today to have John Sacco. And John is doing has done his own podcast called Pile of Scrap. And I'd love to learn about that. And also right now, he's got the repurposed video series on episode 3 right now that is absolutely remarkable. Anybody from the metals industry, whatever part of it that you're in, you'll love it. I know the mood of it was just phenomenal. So John, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Greg. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, it is. And I just wanted to, we'll get into your history, but I just want to touch on the video series Repurpose, because it's just so well done. And I just wonder where that came from. What was the idea there?
Well, for the last 4 years, if you will, I've been doing a lot of content. Our company, Sierra International Machinery, Sierra Recycling and Demolition, we are in the recycling industry and demolition industry, and we also provide equipment for the industry. And so the guy I work with, a guy named Darren Doan, we've been working together for over a decade. And we were talking about, hey, what type of content can we create that is it's not a sales job. And, through our discussions about, there's really such a misconception of our industry. The recycled materials industry really has a bad image. They like to call us junk dealers, and they like to call us waste. And we're anything but that. And so in our discussions with Darren, me and Darren, we brainstormed so much. We said, well, why don't we do something? And I called my friend Jay Rabinowitz. I go, yeah, but I want to show where I had this original idea. It was called Fields to the Mills. So where we go and we do our demolition, process it, and then it gets processed and shipped to a steel mill. Well, what happened is this idea kind of grew from Fields to the Mills, and talking to a couple of people, and like, well, I can get you into a steel mill to film, and so it kind of grew, and we called it Repurposed. Somehow one day I was just walking in my yard and came up with the name. But the whole concept and idea behind Repurpose is to change the narrative about what it is our industry does, because so many people have no concept that the car they drive, let's start with the car, that it's recycled metal. Your steel body is recycled iron. Your aluminum transmission housing, or your aluminum motor block, or for that matter, your Ford F-150 with your military grade aluminum, that's all recycled metals. And changing the narrative that this isn't junk what we're doing. We're actually the first step in manufacturing, because we are the critical supply chain for mills, for steel mills and foundries and aluminum smelters and copper smelters, stainless, and for that matter, paper, because paper will be coming next. So our industry supplies the mills with the raw materials they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Saying to everybody those messages, and they come through very clear in the videos. And I'm of the same thought process about the industry. I'm a bit broader, but like this industry, the metals, is so critical to everything that we do on our daily lives, right? Every single thing has a metal in it, or a way of, I always use the smartphone connection, because first off, smartphone has metals in it. Second to that is there's the satellites and the power towers that get you all the information and all the power you need. It's just abundant, but nobody thinks of it.
No, they really don't. And I don't want to call people ignorant because that's
No,
not,
no, that's no,
it's just
that's
they just don't understand where the material comes from because it's never been really educated. They've never been educated to it.
yeah.
Everybody thinks recycling is the aluminum can, right? Everybody thinks recycling is that PET bottle, whereas they don't know how much the our industry provides these materials. And I made a post today on my LinkedIn about, I challenged people to share this series Repurposed with all their policymakers, their congressmen, their state senators, state assembly, the local councils. Why? Because our country, our independence depends on our ability to provide proper infrastructure. Infrastructure is steel based, roads, any highway project, all that rebar is recycled, comes from recycled iron. How about a military? How much? Think
Oh
about
my
all
gosh.
all the recycled metals that it takes, from the brass casings to ammunition to the tanks, the steel and the aluminum and aircraft and the titanium, etc. And then the food supply. John Deere, they have foundries, and I use John Deere as an example because we don't harvest food without recycled iron because you got to make tractors, right?
Hmm.
And then the food that gets harvested goes to processing plants. They're made from steel. And so it goes on. How about a hospital? How about our schools?
Everything.
All the metals and all our schools for kids to get educated, that's coming from the recycling industry. Not 100%, but the majority of all those materials. And, how about, I like this one. I just thought of this one the other day. You can't take a shower without the recycled metals because the brass, your plumbing, recycled metals. Can't get out of your room because if your room has a knob on it, it's going to be brass. Well, that's coming from the recycled materials industry. So when people start seeing this, and I had a congresswoman I was talking with that I had met back in DC. She was from a different state. She just goes, John, I just honestly never thought about it. And that's it.
And that's it.
Thought provoking. That's what I love about this series. It's thought provoking.
It is. It definitely is, man. And so I hope that there's a whole ton more coming, because it's just exactly down my alley of getting the word out about the industry. But also what's happening is, we've got a generation, like yourself, that's, looking to retire at some point. And then it's exciting, getting the excitement of a younger generation about an industry that is so critical. And I'm, putting things together in my head of how we approach that. But, this is the front lines right now, is getting people aware, right?
I think you bring up a good point because, in curriculum, in jobs, okay, that our industry provides a vast majority of all types of jobs, from the trades, from the welders to the electrical, the blue collar work, but also the white collar work for the engineers that we need, the accountants that we need, the financial analysts that our industry needs. There's so much that our industry offers. And really, the problem, people don't find it, if you call it the junk business, the waste business, not too many people go to college to get a degree in engineering and say, yeah, I'm going to go work in waste. No, they want to go work in tech. Well, our industry is very high tech. And so
Yes, it is.
spreading the word. And then also, quite frankly, people like to work for a cause that can change things to a positive. And no industry reduces CO2 emissions and keeps our environment more green than the recycled materials industry. Nobody. And I think by this series and by getting this message out there, we will change the narrative. I'm just one guy. My brother and I funded this project ourselves. It's a self-funded project. But I think the message is spreading already. I feel it and I see it already.
Good. So for anybody listening that maybe, coming into this episode, never heard anything about the industry and the recycling bit, can you give them an idea of, how recycling works to be green? Like, what is it what happens?
That's fantastic. I'll keep this fairly simple. There's two ways to look at it. The recycled materials industry takes materials, processes it, and get it ready for reuse. Okay. And why is that green? Because where would these materials end up? It's not waste because they're a commodity. But if we didn't process this materials, and what would happen? So what we do is we process materials in locations and facilities throughout the world. And these materials then get repurposed at mills. And when you take recycled iron, you go to a steel mill with it, you save in the 60th percentile of energy usage and CO2 emissions. So based on what we do, the material we provide to steel mills, the energy savings is enormous, and we're no longer having to mine iron ore and coking coal. And so that's really, if you will, that's green. Take the aluminum part. Aluminum can be made from aluminum bauxite, which is mined, or it can be manufactured, secondary manufacturing, taken recycled aluminum, and recycled aluminum saves in the 90th percentile of CO2 emissions and into the 90th percentile of energy savings. So when you look at the energy savings and the reduction of CO2 emissions by recycling the materials our industry provides to manufacturing into the remelting and reusing of, and for that paper mills is the same, you can't deny how much savings, and that in alone is huge for the green industry, for calling things green, because without us, you would have what? You'd have to be into taking our natural resources out of the ground. So, and depleting the world of its natural resources through what we do, like in America, 72% of all new steel is made from recycled iron. That's a huge amount of tonnage.
Absolutely.
And just think about CO2 emissions don't have a border. Okay. What you save here in the US, or what somebody's doing in a different country, by what we do here in America, we are the most environmentally and safety conscious industry when it comes to the recycling industry than anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And by having this industry here in the US, we are definitely reducing the CO2 emissions, clearly, and we're providing worker safety, as you saw in episode 2, how SSAB and their behavioral-based safety program and how important it is to them, which is also important to anybody in our industry. So it really has its tentacles, its footprint about saving the environment and the people who work in it and providing them with a safe workplace. It's unmeasurable, and it can't be denied.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. That's where the value is, the people. Absolutely.
Well, with the people are the resources to help make this happen. I mean, there's a lot of equipment involved, but this equipment, there's a lot of automation, but you still need a lot of people to handle the materials that we handle in our own facilities and in the mills that repurpose the recycled metals and paper and what have you.
Yeah, fair enough. So I out there in my travels and, talking with people, I find there's some definitely a sentiment and feelings around, starting to, well, it's already happening, keeping things local within, North America. Are you seeing that as well, John?
Well, look, our industry trades globally. Okay. We trade materials all over the world. Mm-hmm. Because anybody who uses recycled materials to make their new product, be it paper, steel, aluminum, copper, stainless, there's in the world that these materials are traded. There is a increase in mills being built here in the U.S., the electric arc furnaces. There will be an increased demand for recycled iron to make new steel. So you do have some of that onboarding, the new productivity coming back to the U.S., because really when you start thinking about the supply chain for mills, when you can have that mill here in the U.S., they can secure their supply chain here in the U.S. because there's so much metals and paper being generated internally in the U.S. through our manufacturing and through the obsolete recycling programs that we have and everything that we do in taking these materials in. Mills are finding that there's a great source of materials here in the U.S., and It's not disrupted by shipping, by geopolitical incidences. You just never know. And so that's why you see these industries come back, because the supply chain is strong here in the US to fill mills with the materials they need.
Beautiful. Good. So John, what's your history, man? Where
Well, okay.
what's your
My history
story?
Well, I am a son of an Italian immigrant who came to America in 1935.
Yeah.
And after World War II, my father, he came to New York, and he ended up in California somehow, some way. And he was in the agri-packaging industry. And in agri-packaging, they used to use a lot of used burlap bags. And that was the form of bulk shipping back in the days. And in the 40s and early 50s were burlap bags. And then as things evolved in the 50s in the property here, we started taking recycled metals. We started processing iron and copper and aluminum. It was a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brother and I, second generation. So my brother Philip, he runs our metal recycling and demolition company, and I run the equipment company. But it was all second generation, if we will, because my dad and he had a partner at the time. They built the agri-packaging and also the metals recycling facility as it grew. And then in the late 80s, we sold off the agri-packaging because agri-packaging had completely changed and shifted to these bulk carriers, and that can carry more than 100-pound bag of flour and potatoes and what have you. So we got out of that and got involved with equipment for the industry as a distributor from a manufacturer out of Italy. And then in the early 2000s, we started manufacturing our own balers and conveyors in Georgia. So what we do is all recycling related, and that's kind of the story. And then I've just been involved, and I was chairman of the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, our trade association, back in 2011, 2012. So I've been in it, and I still have a passion for it.
Good. Well, that comes through. There's no doubt about that.
Well, somebody has to do it, right?
Hey, there you go. Absolutely. Hey, what over all the years in the industry, what has changed? Is anything
Well,
changed?
yeah, there's a lot that's changed. In respect to the technology involved in processing the different recyclable materials from iron, copper, aluminum, and paper, and the MRFs that handle curbside recycling, being able to separate. A lot has changed in the separation. And also what you found is the recycled materials, the way they've been processed are cleaner, and the steel mill technologies, the electric arc furnace has changed as well, and their ability to take recycled iron and with additives and chemistry, they have been able to produce a very strong product steel that is as strong, if not stronger, through the chemistry and engineering of steel. Mm-hmm. That materials made from virgin steel made from virgin iron ore, for example, it's pure in some sense, but with additives, the electric arc furnaces have been able to create stronger steel for different industries. And there's a lot that's changed, and it's always changing. Technology and processing changes, and different types of equipment. I mean, if you look at the early days in our industry, the material handlers were these big, huge cable cranes. Today, it's all hydraulic material handlers. And so the hydraulics have changed, the technology in hydraulic pumps and shears and balers, and it just so much has changed. Those technology advancements have enhanced our industry's processing capabilities to take materials, process them more efficiently, and that way, by dropping the cost of processing, you become more competitive than you do than with virgin materials.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So at one time, was it people just sorting the scrap, or I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a heavy labor. It still is, quite frankly. Right. There's a lot of labor involved with what we do, but back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you didn't have the electric arc furnace. So they were all the integrated steel mills, and those integrated steel mills use iron ore and coking coal to heat it up, and they use a little bit of scrap recycled iron to, make new steel. Well, the technology with electric arc furnaces changed dramatically where recycled iron would go now, because
Right.
EAF, the electric arc furnace, uses predominantly 90-something percentile of recycled iron to make new steel. That's a dramatic change, and also a dramatic change in the use of energy and the CO2 emissions. So that technology completely changed the marketing or the markets for recycled materials.
Okay, cool. Have all of the, okay, so who are the major players on the producer side on the West Coast? Is it Nucor, and then who else?
Well, and interesting enough, though, the Western mills, there's not a lot of Western mills. Nucor has one in Utah. You have Schnitzer up in Oregon.
Right.
Commercial Metals is putting a mill out in Arizona. But the real players of the game are when you get into the Midwest region and the Southern region, because of the ability to acquire land, energy supply for the mill, water. The West Coast, we don't have a lot of water, and water is needed in the production of new steel, and energy is a big component where you can put a steel mill. And you also have to be close to your supply chain. And when you look at California, and then you go east through Arizona and through Nevada, you get to in the Rocky Mountains, it's a low population density, big land, little. So the transportation of materials is a little bit more costly. So that's why you see the mills up and down the Mississippi, and it's not because they're very close to supply chain and the ability to ship materials into those mills in Ohio and in Illinois and Indiana, in Iowa and in Arkansas and Texas and in South Carolina, where all these mills, in Georgia, where these mills are located, Alabama, they're close to the supply chain of a lot of tonnage that can move quickly and in a short distance, and reducing that transportation costs, which makes it more efficient and more, not more valuable. It just becomes more reliable.
Yeah, fair enough. So you guys have to truck that stuff, or do they come and get it?
Well, okay, so in California, for instance, where we're in Bakersfield, we're in the center of the state. We have put a new rail spur into our facility here in Bakersfield, so we can ship gondolas of recycled iron to the western part of the United States. But the West Coast market is an export market. It's driven to where the recycled iron is shipped into Korea, and to Malaysia, and Vietnam, for that matter, Indonesia, India, and on the East Coast, the export, out of Boston and New York and Savannah, those in Miami, for instance, and those ports are used for loading bulk that will go into, for instance, Turkey. Turkey has a large population of electric arc furnaces, which need recycled iron. So, it's a global market. There isn't just U.S., it's a global market. And by the port along the coastlines, and East Coast, West Coast, you have a lot of exportation of recycled iron, and for that matter, copper and aluminum and paper.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. All right. Well, so what are the struggles that are happening in the industry right now?
Well, one of the struggles, first of all, is the education of what it is we do. Yeah. And why do I say that? Because there's some regulators and policymakers think of our industry as waste. And that's why in episode 2, I used the gold analogy, because nobody would think gold is waste, right? Everybody thinks gold is valuable. It's used in commercial, industrial, it's also used in jewelry, electronics, so many industries, in medical. So, and it has a big value. So nobody would ever think gold is waste, but they want to lump recycled iron, paper, as into waste. But you can't, because those materials are needed to be repurposed into something new. Yes, they're not $1,800 an ounce like gold, or $22 an ounce like silver, or copper near $4 a pound. But these materials are vital and raw material for critical manufacturing. As the pandemic, we learned terms of what is essential, what is critical manufacturing. Well, these materials are essential for critical manufacturing. So the challenge is hey, don't lump us into waste. Waste is what has no further use. So that's always a challenge. You have also a challenge because of the misunderstanding of what it is we do, that regulations, instead of working with industry to create regulations that enhance the environment, sometimes this is not all the time, sometimes regulations are created that make what we do very, very difficult, because there's some standards that, quite frankly, can't be met. For instance, let me give you an example. In a paper mill, the Clean Water Act at the EPA states that PCBs, anything under 50 parts per billion is acceptable. Well, when you make a new cardboard, take the Cheerios box. Everybody knows that the Cheerios box, that yellow color of a Cheerios box. Well, that yellow, believe it or not, and blue inks and green inks, because blue and yellow make green, right? So when you go to recycled paper that has those colors on it, what happens is the ink in and when you're putting in the batch and the water, and you're pulping in the pulper, it somehow creates a PCB. But the PCB is a very small part. It's well under the 50 parts per billion. But what happens is now the EPA wants to change the Clean Water Act to 1 part per quadrillion. Well, there's no technology out there that can filter water and filter out PCBs to 1 part per quadrillion. See, now that's a challenge. I mean, 50 parts per billion and then 1 part per quadrillion is such a dramatic change in how you process it, how you filter water, that it really it's not obtainable, because the technology doesn't exist to filter our blood. Okay, if you were to take a blood sample of everybody, spin it, I think you'd probably find 1 part, 2-3 parts per quadrillion of PCBs in our blood. It's there. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you have these type of regulations, and the filtration of water, and you'll see this in season 2 when we visit a paper mill. They have an amazing filtration system that filters their water cleaner than it comes out of the Spokane River. The water they put back into the river is actually cleaner than it comes out, and their filtration gets down to 7 parts per trillion.
Oh my gosh.
Which is dramatically lower than 50 parts per billion, right?
Yeah.
But if the Clean Water Act and the EPA changes it to 1 part per quadrillion, they won't be able to, they can't make that regulation. So those are the challenges, and understand work together with industry, because in the end, if you eliminated these industries in the US because of regulations and burdens that are unobtainable, these industries would be shipped somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if these industries are shipped somewhere else? They're not going to do it as clean as we do.
No.
And they're not going to do it as safe as we do. And remember, CO2 emissions have no border. So if something in Asia is being done where it isn't on the same standard that we have here in the US on current terms, that CO2 emissions is going to get in the atmosphere, and it's going to come over, and it's going to end up here. So it's narrow, it's this narrow-sided and narrow-minded to think that somebody else is going to do it cleaner and safer than we are. They're not going to. So we all need to work together, and we are. And there's a lot of progress being made. So I don't want it to come off a negative, because it isn't negative. But we have to work, industry and regulators and policymakers. We all need to work together to understand, first of all, what is it we do now compared to the rest of the world? And now we're cleaner and safer than anybody else. Okay, now you want better standards. Well, let's work towards it. How do we get there in a way that keeps this industry viable and healthy within the US.
It almost begs the question of what comes first, the innovation or the policy, right? And then you see that with the oil industry as well, where they have these crazy ideas that aren't feasible at this point in time. But
I here in Bakersfield, California, we have a big oil industry here, and big ag, and it's interesting. I understand why they want to reduce the reliance on fossil fuel. Okay.
Yeah.
But we have to be real. Yeah. We can't harvest food, the crops to make the food we need to sustain our lives without fossil fuels. It doesn't exist. You can't put electric vehicles in a farm and farm these crops and harvest these crops with it. Materials don't exist. You
Not
can't
right now.
make these harvesters with electric, because again, what does it take to then charge those vehicles up? Think about the grid. So it sounds good. But the reality is, so what comes first? You ask. I think it evolves together, because innovation, everyday industry is innovating. The recycled materials industry innovates the equipment that they use to process materials. We innovate, but we have to have profits to innovate. Without profit, who's going to do the innovation?
Exactly.
Yeah. Research and development, that's a lot. There's a lot of money being, spent in research and development, but the companies that are in the industry, the private industry, has to be able to have profits to invest into innovation. So, and then those where you have to work with regulators, because they have to understand, well, you may want this technology doesn't exist right now, so you can invest gazillions of dollars. Nobody knows if we can achieve that, and so that could put bankrupt businesses, because they don't have enough money to create the innovation. So everybody's got to work together, stay safe, and be better environmental stewards at all times, and working together. There are solutions out there.
Yeah, I agree. As long as you got the right mindset. Hey, it's been a pleasure, John. I thank you.
I appreciate you having me on. I hope it's been something good to come out of this.
Of course it has. Absolutely. A lot of value here, man.
I've enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking about it, because I think in the end we need to just keep talking about what we do. And I think people realize that. And once they start seeing it, I think everybody working together, we will create a better future for our kids or our grandkids, because in the end, that's what we want to do.
That's what it's all about. Absolutely. Cool. Any parting advice, John?
Yeah, I think the advice is this. We need better education. We need to put this curriculum, for people to understand that recycling is more than an aluminum can, more than a plastic bottle. Because the bulk of the majority, the 90 percentile of all recycling is based from industrial-based recycling and obsolete materials recycling. And that's what our industry is doing. And the more we learn and more we can share and teach people about what it is our industry does, the more understanding and the better down in the future our industry can be, because more people want to be involved with it, more people want to come work in it, and innovate within it.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation is key, but like you say, you got to have profits. So
profits aren't bad, because through profits create innovation.
That's right.
All right, fantastic.
Okay.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
All right, my friend.
All right. Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible.